Outside of the wild main and co-main events of this card, there were also a lot of really good fights on the undercard. Just below the co-main event between Gegard Mousasi and Chris Weidman, there was the fight between Cynthia Calvillo and Pearl Gonzalez. This is Calvillo's second fight in the UFC, and in the first fight, she looked really good, primarily with her grappling, how she was able to just kind of work her way into positions and just she's. I wouldn't say she's not technical. She definitely is technical, but she's definitely gifted, and you can kind of see if you've ever grappled before, if you train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, there are just some times where guys come in where they aren't as experienced as you, but you can just kind of tell, like, by the way that they're able to apply pressure and just how they're able to find positions. They just kind of have something special, and they just have, like, a great aptitude for it. And you can definitely see with Calvillo that she fits into that mold as well, in a way that's kind of like what's made Paige Van Zandt good in the past, where her wrestling isn't exactly the most impressive, but she's still able to out-grapple some really good fighters, like Felice Herrig. In her fight with her, she was able to take her down and control her from top and find a lot of really good positions, even though Herrig, I'd have to imagine, is the higher belt in jiu-jitsu and probably more technical as well. We're seeing a lot of that from Calvillo. So interesting for Team Alpha Male to have a second person like that. Now it sounds like it sounds like Paige Van Zandt's no longer with Team Alpha Male. You have to wonder if Calvillo is part of the reason why. It wouldn't surprise me if she gets the better of Paige in the room. She's more impressive to watch as far as how her grappling goes, and striking wise, it's not like either of them are really fantastic. And then Pearl Gonzalez obviously was of great interest because of the breast implants. It was interesting to see. I think everyone was not really hoping, because I guess that'd be a weird thing to hope for, but just kind of interested to see how she'd fight. You wouldn't want to see her her implants explode or anything like a pro wrestler, but you'd figure if the commission's willing to cancel the fight for a quick second, you'd want to at least see some reason why that's a real concern. And really nothing in that fight came up to give any real concern for that. Thiago Alves beat Patrick Cote. After that fight, Patrick Cote, much like Rumble Johnson, had retired. Cote, a little less surprising because we know that he's got the gig lined up in Canada with UFC where he does their French commentary, and he's very good at it. Still don't know what Rumble's gig is. And then for Thiago Alves, just surprisingly good performance out of him. He had struggled at lightweight. Part of that could have been due to the really big weight cut for him, lost to Jim Miller, but to come back and beat a former middleweight and a guy who's been pretty successful lately in Patrick Cote outside of the Donald Cerrone fight, that's a big sign for him. I don't know what you would exactly do next for Thiago Alves. I don't know that you really want to put him against a top 15 guy quite yet, but he's got a name, and if you got a guy who's building their way up, I don't know if Neil Magny and Kamaru Usman are going to fight. If not, maybe you got the Black Zillions and ATT thing right there. Possibly that's a fight that you can book and at least give Usman a win over a big name if you can't give him a win over a high-ranked guy. But in Usman's case, and we'll get to him soon, I feel like he's probably ready for a higher-ranked guy, more so than a big-name guy at this point. And then the first fight on the card, this one I had predicted during the preview show. I thought that Charles Oliveira, I wasn't really terribly committal on it. I was just saying I was surprised by how the odds were so stacked against Charles Oliveira. I felt that Brooks wouldn't exactly dominate him on the feet, and on the ground, Oliveira would have the advantage. Did not expect Oliveira to actually get the takedown, though, right away. I figured if he was going to do any good work, it'd be off of his back, and he was able to get Will Brooks down, who I'm assuming probably wasn't prepared for the takedown either. He'd fought Michael Chandler in the past and was able to defend takedowns from him, so you'd figure Charles Oliveira probably wouldn't do a whole lot more than Chandler could. But Oliveira was able to get him down. Brooks kind of got back up, but then Oliveira got him back down again, eventually snuck around to his back, sunk in a standing rear naked choke, and Brooks, he hung in there for a while, but it just got to the point where it was too tight and he had to tap. So huge win for Oliveira. It sounds like he wants to get back down to 45. I'd rather not see him down there, but it's his career, it's his decision. Hopefully he does stay at 55 and stay at a healthier weight class for him, but who knows. As far as Will Brooks goes, I feel like he's a guy who still is, in my book, he's a top 10 lightweight fighter, but he's had some tough matchups. Like I had mentioned in the preview, the matchup with Oliveira is not a good matchup for him. Will Brooks is a guy who's really effective when he's able to put a lot of pressure on guys, keep them from taking him down. He's really good against wrestlers, and he's really good at just kind of staying active on his feet. And if he gets you down, he's pretty good at staying pretty safe and doing well with his ground and pound. Against a guy like Oliveira, again, it's just not a position where you want to grapple with him. And with Oliveira's length, it was going to be a tough one to strike. And then speaking of Oliveira, there was the Cowboy Oliveira fight too, where it was a little bit closer in the beginning, but again, he was fighting a guy who massively outsized him and had no business in the weight class. Hopefully Will Brooks gets I wouldn't necessarily say easier, but a better matchup that fits his style next time around, because I do think that he still has a chance to work his way up in the lightweight division. At this point, I wouldn't say that he's really going to be a future UFC champion, but he can definitely still be a top contender for him. On the undercard, Miles Jury made his return Just absolutely dominated Mike Delatorre, took him down, just dominated with position, just started raining down elbows on him, and eventually won by a ground and pound TKO. Kamaru Usman, this was a tough pick for me because I knew how good Usman was, but I also knew how good Strickland was. And I think that says more about Strickland, or it says more about Usman in the aftermath of this. I thought Strickland could actually win this fight, and I believe I actually might have picked him as well. Just Strickland, pretty savvy grappler. I believe he's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, pretty good wrestler, a pretty good defensive wrestler too. But Usman was just able to get him down, control position the entire time, land some hard shots, and just a really impressive performance out of him. So, like I was saying before, you could either put him up against a top-ranked guy. He's asking for Neil Magny, which is a fight that I'd be interested in. But again, if you can't get him with a top-ranked guy, at least go for a name like Alves. But hopefully he does get a top-ranked guy, because I think he's a guy who's slowly working his way into title contention, and hopefully he can have some more exciting finishes and doesn't end up in the John Fitch situation where he's just out-grappling everyone and no one's excited and no one wants to see him in a title fight. He's a great fighter, and hopefully as he keeps improving, he starts getting some finishes to add on to the impressive performances. Because like I said, the way that he beat Sean Strickland, if you don't know who Sean Strickland is, or if you don't remember any of Sean Strickland's past fights, this might not seem impressive to you, but this is a very impressive one in the way he did it. Shane Burgos defeated Charles Rosa. Rosa had a pretty good strategy out there. Burgos does like to lean a lot on his front leg, likes to box a lot, use a lot of head movement and counter. So attacking that front leg was pretty effective initially, but Burgos was able to make some adjustments later on in the fight, caught Rosa, drilled him. Rosa was kind of flopping around, making some weird faces, but it was clear that he was rocked, and the ref stepped in while he was still standing. I didn't have any problem with the stoppage. It looked as though Rosa wasn't going anywhere positive from there. After the first hard shot, he took a couple other hard shots, so it's not like he was doing any better to defend himself, and he certainly wasn't offensive at that point. And in the first fight on the undercard, Patrick Cummins defeated Jan Blachowicz. I thought that Blachowicz was going to win this fight, and if you watch the first round, you can understand why I thought so, but he also, it's sort of like Chris Weidman, but obviously Weidman, you didn't get to see the whole fight played out, but he definitely got tired after the first round. I don't know if he shot his load trying to get the finish, or what exactly happened, but he got exhausted. Patrick Cummins was eventually able to out-wrestle him, and even though you could tell that Blachowicz was probably better off his back than Cummins was on top, he was getting some good armbar attempts. Between him getting more tired and Cummins being more sweaty, those just weren't gonna land, and Cummins was just starting to dominate position, and he got the win. One of the things that kind of bugged me seeing Patrick Cummins out there, though, is his top game was very, very rudimentary. He wasn't really trying to pass. He really wasn't showing many signs of a good guard passer either. A lot of it was he'd get to the guard and just kind of do a can opener, throw some arm punches. He really wasn't ever in a position where you felt like he was about to finish or he was working his way towards the finish. And against a guy like Blachowicz, who's just dead exhausted, if you're not able to really do a whole lot from the top, that's a bit concerning against some of the better guys in the division. And obviously his chin seems to be problematic for him as well. So good win for Cummins, but it doesn't really tell me much about his future in the division. As far as Blachowicz goes, looked like he was the better fighter. He just didn't have the better gas tank. So next time around, you probably still want to give him a top 15 guy, but he's going to have to work on his conditioning and be in a position where that's not going to happen. Because if that's how he looks in a 15-minute fight, if he eventually works his way towards some main events and has to fight 5 rounds and fight 25 minutes, it's going to be a real problem for him. And then on the Fight Pass undercard, the main event of that was Gregor Gillespie versus Andrew Holbrook. As I had mentioned in the preview show, Gillespie is a guy who you're hearing a lot of really positive things out of American Top Team from. And usually when you have guys who are getting a lot of positive words out of their camp, that's a really good sign for them. But when it's out of a camp like ATT, that's a huge sign that they have a lot of potential. So between just his great wrestling background and him just showing up and knocking out Andrew Holbrook in 21 seconds, it really confirms a lot of what they're saying. And he's a guy who's sort of in that Usman territory now, where everyone kind of is starting to see this is a guy who's probably top 10 in his division. He's very talented, but it's a question of who do you put him up against so he can prove it. Definitely want to give him a top 15 fighter in his next fight, I believe. I don't know how ATT feels about that, how long they want to kind of keep him working, keep him improving. Obviously, he had mentioned after the fight ended that the knockout was something new for him, and it just shows signs of improvement. I don't know how he wants to time everything before he starts fighting against the division's elite, but he's clearly a handful for anyone in that weight class. The next fight was Desmond Green versus Josh Emmett. Not exactly the most exciting fight. Emmett was just trying to throw a lot of power strikes, whereas Green was trying to be a little bit quicker, but Emmett was taking the center. That was pretty clear that Desmond Green won that fight, but it did go to a split decision. But big win for Green. He's a former University of Buffalo wrestler, so for him to get a win in Buffalo is pretty big. Caitlin Chukagian versus Irene Aldana. This was a fight that I didn't really watch it from a judge's standpoint. I wasn't really like trying to score it, so I had absolutely no idea who won. But even if you were, it wasn't really clear who was doing better. Aldana looked like she was throwing harder, but she wasn't even. A lot of her punches, like she'd be swinging hard, but she wouldn't exactly like be putting her hips into it all the time, or wouldn't always turn her shoulders on it. So they didn't exactly do the most damage. Chukagian wasn't necessarily doing a ton of damage herself either. She was doing that annoying ki thing that Holly Holm does too, which made it pretty easy to cheer against her. But she gets the win. And in the first fight of the card, Magomed Bibulatov, who is a guy who's being looked at as a huge prospect. They were talking about him being like the next Khabib. He had a good showing against Janelle Lausa, but it wasn't one where I'm clamoring to see him against the division's top guys. Lausa's not a ranked guy. On the feet, it was kind of close. I guess Bibulatov, just the throw of the takedown was giving him the edge there. And then on the mat, again, it wasn't exactly like a Patrick Cummins type of situation where they're not doing anything off the top, but it's not like he got Lausa down and was just passing his guard, working towards strong positions, attempting submissions, or doing any of that. It was more just kind of control and pound out, and that's not always the best thing, especially when you have to start fighting guys who are more skilled or having to take fights where they go into the 5 rounds because you're taking a main event or you're fighting for a title. So he's got some time, obviously. He just made his debut now, but he's not a guy where I'd be clamoring to see him against a top 15 guy next or even in 2 fights from now.